on Russia and Ukraine as well?
Yeah, I'll give you an update. I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all, okay? We're in the middle of talking, and he's shooting rockets into Kiev and other cities. I don't like it at all.
President, what do you want to do about
And
that?
I'm surprised. I'm very surprised. We'll see what we're going to do. What am I going to tell you? You're the fake news, aren't you? You're totally fake. All right, any other questions? I don't like what Putin is doing, not even a little bit. He's killing people. And something happened to this guy, and I don't like it.
Can I follow up on that?
Ever since the 2016 election, everybody has been saying, or at least the fake news media has been saying, that Donald Trump is in the pocket and buddies with Vladimir Putin. However, this recent statement from Donald Trump proves that there are much tensions between Russia, Ukraine, and now the United States, which may have to get involved, and this could cause havoc for the markets. In other words, things are getting pretty serious, and markets as of recently have actually sold back off, especially if you're in any altcoins, including XRP. However, there is so much going on in the market, and it actually can be quite overwhelming to know what to do next. So in this video, I'm going to show you what to look for on the price action, what to look for in terms of the news, what actually matters and what doesn't. And right now, XRP has a deal with Dubai, which we're going to cover in this video. We're also going to cover the recent EU tariff trade deal that Trump announced and has now rolled back, and what that's going to do to markets. We're obviously going to be covering a bit on the Russia-Ukraine conflict and what Trump said directly on Truth Social. And we're even going to cover a video from the Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, on stablecoins and what this is going to mean for digital assets like crypto, the US bond market, and of course the US dollar. So let's dive into the video, my friend. And as always, if you're feeling blessed and bullish, comment 777. And if you're going to be the wealthiest person in your family tree, smash the subscribe button. Hello and welcome back to the channel, my friend. If you're new here, my name is Paul, and you can find me on Twitter or X at PauliDeFi, PauliDeFi. We have been really busy in the markets this week, and much of it surrounds Trump and now this new news, not only over the Europe tariffs and what's happened there, but also Russia and Ukraine, and Donald Trump basically calling Putin crazy for doing what he's currently doing, which could actually escalate things over in Eastern Europe, which will again involve much of Europe, and just the economic uncertainty of that alone will cause a steep sell-off in markets, especially if things escalate, which I'm assuming Donald Trump wants to de-escalate, as he's consistently been one of the most anti-war presidents in history. Now, not only did we see that video of Trump talking about Putin at the beginning, but also he made a post on Truth Social talking about how he had a very good relationship with Putin and Russia. Now, he does this with virtually all dictators all around the world, and many people like to say, well, you must be a dictator because you're talking. But ultimately, that is how peace is worked out. You have to talk with enemies or dictators and figure out what makes them tick and try not to escalate, try not to poke the bear. Ultimately, people win when there is diplomacy, even with our enemies. And that's exactly why he says these are relationships. People always misconstrue this stuff. But at the end of the day, the statement that he recently made is not great, considering the fact that he literally said he is crazy and needlessly killing a lot of people. And this is a crazy statement coming from Donald Trump, because I don't think he's ever made a statement like this about Putin before. In other words, Putin truly is currently on a war path, and the talks to peace are no longer even on the table, especially because Zelensky is in the same boat. And ultimately, most of Europe and the powers that be never even wanted this war to end to begin with. We wanted to consistently fund this war while the military-industrial complex gets richer and richer. Not only do nations suffer, our inflation gets worse, and people die. In other words, it's extremely important that right now Donald Trump de-escalates this situation, because it's going to harm the market either way. And I know that he's a president that is all for the American public when it comes to the markets. That said, it hasn't been that great, considering there's constantly a bunch of volatility surrounding tariffs, but I think in the long term it's going to be quite well, as long as we don't have a new outbreak of a major situation over in Eastern Europe. As Rep. Don Bacon even said, it's time for honesty. Peace talks are having zero effects on Putin. His goal is to dominate Ukraine, and he won't stop until he realizes he can win. The US and allies must arm Ukraine to the teeth. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I think this is only going to escalate things even more, but I'm in agreement right now, obviously, and this is what Donald Trump is saying, that peace talks are having zero effect on Putin. I think the wrong answer would be to literally arm Ukraine even more, considering much of this money goes unaccounted for completely and gets lost along the way to the military industrial complex to fund foreign wars, and there is virtually no accountability. However, it's really hard to know exactly what's going on over there, considering we don't have boots on the ground and we only hear from the media on all sides, and people are very political over this issue. All I know is that markets will suffer if any major news breaks. This weekend, Russia launched 90 ballistic and cruise missiles and 500 drones at cities across the country, which I do believe is verified. On the flip side, though, Ukraine has been launched 2,000 drones towards Moscow this week. So yes, things are escalating, and I think this is going to harm markets a bit. And this is straight off of the back of Trump's tariff threats to not only Samsung and iPhone, but also against the EU, which he said he would impose to the tune of 50%. And this threw markets into a major slump over the long holiday weekend. Much of the cryptos and altcoins that we've invested into actually started to dump. The only thing that's been holding up is Bitcoin, which is quite interesting and leads me to believe that people, or even nation states, or individual investors and institutions are starting to look at Bitcoin as a hedge against all of this economic uncertainty. It seems to be the only real money that is digital. However, the markets actually responded relatively well compared to what we used to think, considering people are starting to get used to how Trump uses tariffs in order to renegotiate deals. In other words, escalation, de-escalation, and now re-escalation are a part of Trump's trade war, which is going to be the theme that drives the market. And so markets actually recovered a bit because Trump decided to postpone those European tariffs to July 9th. But at the end of the day, it is getting all of the EU down to the negotiating table in order to work out a new trade deal with the United States. And right now, Europe has a very cautious approach to the negotiations and what they refer to as the EU's reluctance to make concrete offers that address US concerns. And those would be fees on streaming services, value-added taxes or VATs, automotive regulations, and fines imposed against US companies in antitrust cases. He wants to figure all of those things out and get a better deal for the United States. And I think although it hurts the markets in the short term, again, in the long term, this is going to be very beneficial for not only the US economy, but for also the American worker, and bringing jobs in manufacturing back to the United States, and also allowing us to have a fair game at selling our own products over in these other countries where they are highly taxed and highly regulated, and make it virtually impossible for an American company to take advantage of a European market. Trump is truly shaking up the world of trade. In other news, things are actually looking really good from the fundamental side, although not as much on the price action side right now with XRP, because the odds of getting an approval on an XRP ETF have now surged to 83% amid institutional demand, which is consistently growing. And this is probably due to some major news and events surrounding Dubai, which is actually launching their very first ever real estate tokenization platform directly on the XRP ledger. Residents can now buy fractional property shares with $16 billion in tokenized real estate planning by 2023. In other words, tokenized assets or real world assets are making their way onto the XRP ledger. And I see no situation or circumstance in which this is not the reality here in the near future for the United States using the XRPL. And again, much of that value will find its way onto the XRP token. Then you combine that with the fact that the US dollar and the bond market will likely be stabilized by the growing demand and need for stablecoins, or even the RLUSD stablecoin, which is not only regulated but one-for-one backed in the United States. And then you have major supporters like the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent behind the whole idea and supporting it. So let's have a listen.
If really we went big into stablecoin in this country, what effect could that have on the strength of the dollar? Because people might have to hold dollars in order to match against it, or even for treasuries.
Well, we are going big on digital assets. So Trump administration has made digital assets a priority. Past administration starved and almost made extinct a lot of these companies and pushed it offshore. So what we want to do is apply the highest U.S. regulatory and AML standards to digital assets, especially stablecoins. And I've seen estimates that just over the short term, stablecoins could create $2 trillion of demand for U.S. Treasuries and Treasury bills. To put that in context, the number is probably about 300 billion right now.
If really we went big.
And so now let's dive into the price action, ladies and gentlemen. And specifically, I'm actually looking at less so price action and more just the total amount of money in Bitcoin. And since the lows here on May 14th, the Bitcoin dominance has risen to 64.4% of all of the money in the market. In other words, when you come over to something like CoinMarketCap, you can see Bitcoin is still chilling really well at about $109,000, holding a strong support while everything else tanked or dumped pretty hard over the weekend. For example, XRP sitting at $2.29. But when you look at a $2.16 trillion market cap versus something like XRP at 134 billion, this is a major difference and more than 20 times the size. In other words, this one chart alone, going all the way back to the lows here in September of 2022, prove that the majority of investors have an appetite to buy and hold Bitcoin and are moving away from virtually all altcoins. Still, that leaves some asymmetric risk to reward plays. And even though right now XRP has been lagging behind Bitcoin, as you can see, Bitcoin put in a new all-time high, XRP has failed to put in a new all-time high. The all-time high is sitting at about $3.40 across most major exchanges. And just for those of you guys who are going to be in the comments saying, no, the all-time high was actually 384, that is not actually true. That is a complete error in terms of how oracles are gathering data using the all-time high on a few Korean exchanges based on the Korean exchange rate, but that was not the reality on virtually all US-based exchanges. And if you try to sell at 384, you actually never had the bid to do it, or better yet, the offer to do it. So if you want to argue in the comments, that's totally fine. But the actual technical all-time high for XRP was 340. And as you can see here, we have failed to break above that. But one day it will. In similar fashion, during this period of time, Bitcoin was moving really hard and strong and putting in some cool new all-time highs all the way through last year into November, whereas XRP was lagging really hard. And then in a single couple of months, a 3-month period, XRP rallied and actually outperformed all of the market in terms of major market cap cryptos. So I thoroughly expect something like that to happen again, even though XRP is holding a really strong, good range. And I'm still accumulating and buying all the way down to about 215. I believe anything above 215 is a good buy on something like XRP. And I'm looking for a breakout above 260. Anything above 260 is likely taking us directly up to that $3 range. Anything above the $3 range is major bull zone territory. And I could easily see this thing flying in again within a month to 2 months max, all the way up to $5. And in that time frame, potentially even surpassing Ethereum as the second largest crypto by market cap. Either way, this thing is showing really strong relative strength, and it's also put in a new uptrend for a series of higher highs and higher lows, coming all the way back to the low of April 8th. So we're in bull territory, and right now, even on the daily time frame, although that 10 and 20 EMA look like they want to cross over, it's looking very similar to like it did back on May 7th. So it's very much possible that we see a nice little explosion of price action to the upside. I would like to see XRP break above the 247 range to be happy, or at least hold anything into that 215 range for a new local low. But I'm still bullish XRP. I'm still very bullish the crypto market, and Bitcoin demand is continuing to increase as the supply available on exchanges continues to decrease. This is all very bullish for crypto, even under a very uncertain macro environment, which leads me to believe that the end of the year this year is going to be insane. And so accumulating at any price right now on your favorite cryptos and altcoins is probably a really smart move. And that's it for the video, folks. If you enjoyed it, be sure to head on over to bullrunners.com to get this free ebook and unlock the 23 secrets to becoming a crypto millionaire. All you have to do is click that link in the bio or the description below, then enter your email and we'll send it directly to your inbox. Thanks so much for watching the video, my friend. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Till next time, goodbye.